Hey guys! Tonight we're going to slip through the creaking gates of a medieval castle just as winter begins to bite. The wind outside howls like a hungry wolf, clawing at the stone walls that seem to hold their breath. Inside, the air smells of old smoke and damp wool. You can almost feel the chill seeping through the cracks in the masonry, brushing against your skin like the fingers of the past. The fire in the great hall flickers weakly, a few orange tongues of warmth dancing above the ashes. Somewhere deep within, a servant coughs, a door groans shut, and silence returns, thick and cold enough to taste. Tonight, we're not just visitors, you are here, walking barefoot on freezing stones, trying to imagine what it was like to survive this endless cold. You'd probably last, what? A few hours? Maybe less. Medieval winters didn't care about your willpower or your fluffy blanket. You'd have frozen before finishing your morning bread. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing how far this little midnight journey reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand in the shadow of the castle's great keep. Snow drifts lazily across the courtyard, muffling every sound until even your breath feels like an intrusion. The world has gone still. The peasants in the surrounding villages have already retreated indoors, their huts packed with straw and smoke. But inside these walls, life is about to become a very different kind of endurance test. The castle looks strong from the outside, stone towers, thick gates, banners stiff in the wind, but strength doesn't keep you warm. And it certainly doesn't fill your stomach. The truth is, medieval castles were built for defense, not comfort. Their thick walls kept out arrows and invaders, but they also trapped the cold. Fireplaces were luxuries, and even those massive ones in the great halls couldn't heat more than a few feet beyond the flame. The rest of the castle? A frozen labyrinth of stone. You can almost hear the echo of boots on flagstones as servants hurry by, their breaths forming clouds in the air. They're preparing for the long months ahead, hauling sacks of grain, barrels of ale, and salted meat into storage. Everything must be counted, rationed, and hidden away before the snow buries the roads. You catch the scent of smoke and dried herbs. Somewhere, a cook is muttering to herself about how last year's stores didn't last past February. And that's the cruel thing about medieval winters, survival wasn't guaranteed. Not even for nobles. Forget the romantic images of roaring fires and golden feasts. Those were special occasions. On most nights, the grand hall was drafty, the food plain, and everyone's eyes carried the same quiet question: will there be enough to last until spring? You make your way through the narrow corridor that smells faintly of damp straw. A guard nods at you, his face red from the cold. His armor creaks as he shifts, probably dreaming of the kitchen's warmth. In the distance, you hear the faint clang of a blacksmith hammering out the last repairs before the forge freezes solid. Even the sound seems sluggish, as if the air itself resists motion. It's hard to imagine how people stayed alive here. You might think, well, at least they had food. But food, in winter, was a memory of summer. Everything depended on how well the castle prepared before the first snow. Meat had to be salted or smoked. Grain had to be dried and stored in barrels. Vegetables, those that could survive, were buried in cool sand or cellars, hidden from frost. And if someone forgot to seal the barrels properly, mold could spread through everything in a matter of weeks. Sometimes, when the snow piled too high and the hunters couldn't leave, the castle became an island of hunger. There were no markets, no trade caravans, just the slow gnawing of time and cold. You imagine waking up one morning, pulling your blanket tighter, and realizing the bread has gone moldy and the butter has turned to stone. The noble family might still dine on roasted meat and spiced wine for a while. But even they weren't immune to scarcity. Servants whispered of lords sending out desperate riders to find fresh supplies, sometimes never to return. And yet, there was beauty in this bleakness. Picture the way candlelight shimmered against the frost that formed on window edges, making the glass glow like honey. Imagine children chasing each other around the hearth, their laughter echoing in the hall. The cook's ladle clatters against a pot, releasing the warm smell of broth and herbs. Survival wasn't just necessity, it was an art. As you step closer to the fire, you can almost feel its faint warmth on your face. Someone throws on another log. Sparks leap upward like fleeting stars. You can hear the soft murmur of voices, plans for how to stretch the rations. Who will guard the food stores? And which servants are trusted enough to hold the cellar keys? Someone jokes about last winter's disaster when a barrel of salted fish turned out rotten. And the smell haunted the kitchen for months. Everyone laughs nervously. Humor, after all, is the best insulation. Outside, the snow thickens. The drawbridge groans under its icy weight. Beyond it, the forest stands black and silent. Somewhere out there, wolves howl, their voices echoing across the frozen hills. You pause for a moment, realizing that the people in this castle once listened to those same sounds every night. Knowing that just one mistake, one missed harvest, one spoiled batch of meat, could mean death before spring. Still, they endured. They sang songs, told stories, and clung to faith. You picture them huddled around the fire, their hands outstretched, eyes reflecting the flames. The youngest servant sneaks a piece of bread and gets scolded. But everyone smiles anyway. The night stretches on, heavy with frost and whispers. You listen to the rhythm of the wind brushing against the old stones. A sound both lonely and eternal. And somewhere deep inside, you understand, this isn't just a story about food. It's about the fragile thread between survival and despair. And the strange comfort people found in the simplest things. A bowl of warm soup. A shared song. A candle still burning when morning came. The fire crackles. The castle breathes. And you, too, begin to feel the slow, steady heartbeat of winter settling in. You wake to the sound of wind whistling through narrow slits in the stone walls. The same slits that once allowed archers to fire arrows at invaders. Now, they serve as gateways for icy drafts that sneak in and nip at your fingers. The room smells faintly of smoke and straw, and you can see your own breath drifting in the air like a ghost. Morning in a medieval castle doesn't start with sunlight, it begins with the groan of wooden doors, the shuffle of servants, and the endless creak of cold muscles trying to move. Outside, the courtyard is dusted in white. The snow has come early this year. And the castle's world has shrunk to whatever can fit within its walls. Beyond the frozen moat, the roads are buried and the forests silent. It's the season when everything slows down. And survival becomes a matter of planning, or luck. Down in the great hall, the steward is already barking orders. Barrels of salted pork must be moved from the gatehouse to the lower cellar. The grain sacks need to be checked for rot. Mice have been busy, and no one wants a repeat of last winter's disaster when half the oats were lost to uninvited guests. You trail behind a few servants as they push open a heavy wooden door leading to the storage rooms below. The air hits you like a wall, thick, damp, and cold enough to make your teeth ache. The cellar smells of earth and dust, of things that used to be alive. Shelves groan under the weight of jars, pickled onions, dried apples, salted fish. Every item here represents hours of work from summer and autumn, the harvesting, drying, and salting that determined whether a castle survived or starved. You run your fingers along the top of a barrel, feeling the frost bloom beneath your touch. Each cask of ale, each sack of grain, is a small act of hope. If they last until the thaw, the castle will make it. If not, well, history is full of winter famines no one likes to talk about. Back upstairs, the lord of the castle surveys the preparations with a stern face. He's not worried about comfort, he's worried about control. Food isn't just sustenance, it's power. Whoever manages the stores decides who eats well and who doesn't. In times of scarcity, loyalty can be bought with a loaf of bread. The steward knows this, and his eyes glint with quiet authority as he tallies the numbers on his wax tablet. Outside, smoke rises from the kitchen chimney. You follow the smell, onions, tallow, and something faintly burnt. Inside, cooks move like ghosts through the haze. The kitchen is the only warm place in the entire castle. The heartbeat of this cold fortress. You can almost hear the sigh of relief as you step closer to the fire pit, where a pot of soup simmers lazily, steam curling upward in fragile ribbons. A woman stirs it with a long wooden ladle, muttering to herself, "Too thin," she grumbles. "Everything's too thin this year." You peek inside and see a watery broth dotted with bits of barley and the occasional piece of carrot. Not exactly a feast, but better than nothing. Another servant enters carrying a small basket of turnips. They're shriveled but precious. He sets them down like offerings to a forgotten god. "That's the last of them," he whispers. The cook sighs, wipes her hands on her apron, and throws them into the pot. This is the quiet war of winter, the battle between hunger and ingenuity. Every crumb, every bone, every grain is counted. The pigs have been slaughtered. The chickens long gone. The dairy cows produce less milk now. And butter turns to stone in the cold. So people get creative. Bread is stretched with ground beans. Soup is thickened with oats. And whatever can be dried is. You can almost taste the monotony. Salted meat. Stale bread. Ale that's slightly sour but still safe to drink. The flavors of winter are fatigue and salt. But to the medieval mind, this was survival. They didn't dream of variety, they dreamed of enough. A few children scamper into the kitchen, rubbing their hands for warmth. The cook shoos them away, laughing despite herself. "You'll burn your fingers," she scolds. One little boy giggles and points at the pot. "Does it taste like summer yet?" She rolls her eyes. "Not this year, lad. You can't help but smile. Humor, in a place like this, is as necessary as food. It's the only thing that fills the space when your stomach doesn't. Later, you follow the steward to another chamber, a room lined with shelves and barrels. Here lie the castle's most guarded treasures, the spices. Tiny jars of pepper, saffron, and cinnamon, each worth more than gold to those who know how to use them. These aren't for everyone, of course. They're for the Lord's table, to remind guests that even in a frozen fortress, power can still taste exotic. You lift one jar and catch a faint whiff of something sharp and fragrant. It's strange to think that while peasants miles away are gnawing on boiled roots, someone here might sprinkle cinnamon over their wine just for the smell of luxury. The contrast feels almost cruel. But even luxury has limits. You overhear two servants whispering about how the noble's personal supply of venison has run low, and the next hunting trip may not be possible for weeks. The snow is too deep. Even the hounds hesitate at the gate, whining softly at the cold. Back in your chamber, you wrap yourself in a coarse blanket. The castle groans around you, the sound of age and endurance. You can hear the wind scraping across the tower stones, like fingernails against the past. You imagine the hundreds of winters this place has seen, each one testing the patience and creativity of its people. Before you drift off, a thought lingers. Surviving here isn't just about storing food. It's about storing faith. Every salted ham and sealed jar is a quiet promise to the future, a reminder that, no matter how harsh the cold, life will find a way to keep simmering. You close your eyes, and for a moment, the wind outside sounds almost like breathing. The castle exhales, and so do you. The morning after feels quieter. The snow outside has deepened overnight, smothering every sound beneath a white blanket. You step to the narrow window slit and peer out. The world is a blur of gray and white, the horizon lost in the haze. Somewhere beyond the moat, a frozen forest stands silent, every branch burdened with frost. Even the crows seem to have given up complaining. You rub your hands together, half for warmth, half for courage, because today, it's bread day, and if there's one thing a medieval castle depends on during winter, it's bread, though not the kind you're picturing. Forget soft, golden loaves fresh from the oven. Forget the aroma that makes modern kitchens feel like home. No, this bread is a survivor's bread. Dense, dark, heavy enough to double as a weapon if needed. Down in the kitchen, the air is thick with the scent of smoke and damp flour. You watch as a servant named Ulrich kneads a lump of dough that looks more like clay than food. His hands move with weary precision. He's done this hundreds of times. Each loaf a small gamble. Will it rise? Or will it crumble like the hopes of last year's harvest? The flour isn't pure wheat. It's a blend of barley, rye, and whatever else they managed to grind, sometimes even ground peas. Acorns, or crushed tree bark when grain ran low. People called it maslin bread. You call it better than starving. Don't let it sit too long. The cook warns. Last batch turned sour. Ulrich grunts and keeps kneading. His fingers are cracked from the cold. His nails blackened with soot. When he finally places the dough near the hearth, it doesn't so much bake as dry, hardening slowly under the faint warmth of the fire. You pick up a loaf from yesterday. It's small, grayish-brown, and has the personality of a rock. When you tap it, it echoes faintly. That's the sound of safety. The cook jokes. Means it'll last. You bite into a corner, instantly regretting it. It's dry, bitter, and tastes faintly of ashes. But it fills the stomach. And that's all that matters. This was the bread of the Middle Ages, the foundation of life. And sometimes the only thing that kept people from hunger's edge. In good years, it was hearty and flavorful. In bad years, it was punishment in edible form. As you chew, the cook tells you that bakers were once among the most important, and most feared, people in the castle. If a baker cheated by using cheap grain or shortchanging flour, it wasn't just frowned upon, it was a crime. In some towns, bakers who tricked their customers were literally tied to their carts and dragged through the streets as punishment. Imagine that next time your sourdough deflates. Still, she says, we're lucky this year. Last winter, we had to mix ground beans with sawdust. You blink. She's not joking. She shrugs. It keeps the belly busy. You can almost hear the quiet pride in her voice. There's something remarkable about it. The human ability to make do. To find meaning in the most meager of meals. By mid-morning, the smell of baking bread drifts through the corridors. Even the Lord's hound lifts its head, sniffing the air. The scent doesn't travel far, it never does in this cold, but it's enough to make people smile. Just a little. Bread meant routine, and routine meant hope. In the great hall, long tables are set with trenchers, flat slabs of stale bread used as plates. They'll soak up broth and grease from the day's meals until they turn soft again. By then, someone will eat them too. Waste is a luxury no one here can afford. The Lord himself prefers his bread white, made from sifted wheat flour, rare and expensive. Only a few loaves like that are baked each month, and they're served during feasts. For everyone else, the darker the bread, the lower your station. It's strange to think that centuries later, people would pay extra for whole grain. History has a wicked sense of humor. You sit near the hearth as people tear chunks from the fresh loaves, dipping them into thin soup or spreading them with a smear of animal fat. There's laughter, soft conversation, and the rhythmic crackle of the fire. The bread may be humble, but in this moment, it feels sacred. Then someone mentions the harvest that failed 3 winters ago. When frost came early and the grain spoiled in the fields. We boiled the straw for flavor. One old guard says, staring into his cup, didn't help much. Another servant laughs darkly. That's when I learned soup from old boots isn't just a story. The room chuckles, though the humor sits heavy in the air. These aren't exaggerations. People really did what they had to. You look at the bread in your hands again and realize it's more than food. It's a reminder of the fine line between comfort and desperation. Every crumb carries the weight of the season, the hope of surviving another day. The cook claps her hands, breaking your reverie. All right, that's enough sitting around. Someone fetch more firewood before the hearth dies. You glance toward the door. The woodpile outside is buried under snow. But you go anyway. The moment you step into the courtyard, the cold cuts through your clothes like a blade. The air is sharp, your breath thick. You grab what logs you can carry and hurry back, each step sinking into the white silence. The sound of your boots crunching snow feels almost sacred, proof that you're still alive. When you return, the bread is ready. The cook slices a piece, offers it to you with a nod. "Eat while it's warm," she says softly. "Tomorrow, it'll taste like stone again." You take a bite, and for a fleeting second, it really does taste like comfort. The kind that can only exist when comfort is rare. Somewhere behind you, a child's voice asks, "Will it always be this cold?" The cook doesn't answer right away. She just stirs the soup, sighs, and whispers, "Until spring, my dear, always until spring." The castle breathes again, quietly, as snow begins to fall once more. The next morning dawns pale and brittle. Frost patterns lace the inside of the window slits like fragile veins. Glittering faintly in the gray light, you lie awake listening to the faint murmur of movement in the corridors, boots scuffing stone, buckets creaking, the distant bark of a dog that hasn't yet given up on warmth. The fire in your chamber has long since gone out, leaving only a dull scent of ash and wood smoke. It's one of those mornings when hunger wakes before you do. Your stomach growls softly, and you realize the bread from yesterday is already as hard as the stones beneath your feet. You gnaw on a piece anyway, feeling the crunch echo in your jaw. This is the rhythm of castle life in winter. Eat what you can, when you can, and pretend it tastes better than it does. Down in the courtyard, the cook's assistants are hauling barrels toward the kitchen. The smell of smoke and salt follows them, a sign that today's work will involve preserving what's left of the meat stores. It's a grim but necessary task. You pull your cloak tight and follow them inside, drawn by the warmth of the hearth and the promise of a story in every crackle of fire. Inside, the scene looks almost ritualistic. Strips of pork hang from wooden beams like pale ribbons. Buckets of coarse salt sit open on the floor, their contents gleaming faintly in the firelight. The cook, sleeves rolled up, directs a small army of servants. Each piece of meat is rubbed, layered, and packed away, transforming fresh flesh into something that might outlast the snow. "This," she says, without looking up, "is the only kind of magic I believe in." Her hands move quickly, pressing salt deep into the cuts. "Without salt, we'd all be dead by February." She's not wrong. In the Middle Ages, salt was life, white gold that preserved everything from fish to cheese to human dignity. Without it, rot claimed everything. And rot didn't wait politely, it crept in silently, spoiling a season's hope in a single night. You crouch near the fire and watch the process. Smoke curls up toward the ceiling, clinging to the beams and painting them black. The air tastes of brine and wood resin. A boy with freckles stirs the embers with a long iron rod, sending sparks dancing like tiny stars. "Keep the smoke thick," the cook orders. "Let it sting your eyes. If it doesn't sting, it doesn't stick." That's how they smoked meat, slowly, painfully, thoroughly. The result was something dark and leathery that smelled like campfire and desperation. It could last for months, even years, if kept dry. You imagine biting into a strip of it, tough, salty, almost flavorless, yet to them, it was security. One servant opens a barrel filled with fish, preserved in layers of salt and herbs. The smell is sharp enough to make you step back. "Cod from the coast," he says proudly, though you doubt pride has much to do with it. "The fish is dry, stiff as parchment. We'll soak it later, for stew." Even nobles relied on such food. Fancy feasts and roasted boar were for festivals and guests. The rest of the time, it was salted pork, smoked beef, dried fish, and whatever pickled vegetables survived the frost. The castle's pantry was a museum of the summer that used to be. You glance around and notice how little light makes it into this place. It's dim, the air thick, but no one complains. Warmth and smell are comfort enough. You think about how strange it is. How people in modern times complain when their fridge breaks for a few hours. While here, survival depends on a handful of salt and smoke. The cook wipes her hands and gestures toward a corner where a few sausages hang from hooks. "That's the Lord's share," she says quietly. "The rest goes to the garrison." You look closer and notice the difference. Those sausages are wrapped in finer cloth, glistening slightly from the extra fat. Even preservation had a hierarchy. When the work is done, the servants gather around the fire, rubbing their hands. Someone jokes about the blessed perfume of salted pig, and laughter ripples through the room. You join them, smiling despite the stinging in your eyes. There's something comforting about shared hardship. It tastes like belonging. As the fire burns low, one of the older women begins to talk. "You know," she says, "they say once there was a winter so harsh that the river froze solid. And they smoked fish right there on the ice. The smell was so strong it drew wolves from miles away." She chuckles. "The wolves ate better than we did." Everyone laughs again, though it's the kind of laughter that hides a shiver. The cold always wins eventually. You step outside for air, pulling your cloak close. The smoke from the chimneys rises in thin columns, vanishing into the pale sky. Somewhere in the distance, church bells toll, a reminder that even in hunger and frost, faith continues its steady rhythm. People cross themselves as they walk, murmuring prayers that spring will come soon. You find yourself wondering what the castle will smell like weeks from now, less like life, more like storage. The salted meat will harden, the fish will dry, and every room will hold a faint echo of smoke. The people will too. They'll carry it in their hair, their clothes, their dreams. And yet, there's something oddly beautiful about it. These smells, these tasks, this endless dance between decay and preservation, it's proof of a stubborn kind of hope. A belief that the world, even frozen and gray, can still be survived. You stand there a while, breathing in the cold air, tasting the salt still clinging to your lips. The castle hums softly behind you, fires crackling, voices murmuring, life continuing. For now, that's enough. The wind shifts, and from somewhere deep within the walls, you catch the faint sound of a lute playing, a slow, melancholy tune that drifts through the corridors like a ghost of summer. You smile, close your eyes, and let it carry you a little closer to warmth. The song from the night before still lingers in your mind when dawn creeps across the frost-bitten courtyard. The castle feels half asleep, its corridors echo faintly with the scrape of boots and the clatter of buckets. Somewhere, a rooster crows with misplaced optimism, as if trying to remind everyone that mornings still exist. Today, the steward has assigned people to the cellars, those hidden guts of the castle where the real story of survival is told. You follow the group down a narrow spiral staircase, the air growing colder with each step until your breath fogs before your face. The scent of earth, mildew, and old stone thickens, It's a smell that speaks of both comfort and warning. Comfort, because food waits here. Warning, because it may not last. The cellar is vast, lit by a few flickering torches. Shadows stretch across rows of shelves stacked with barrels, jars, and cloth-wrapped bundles. It feels like a sacred space, quiet except for the occasional drip of water echoing somewhere in the dark. You half expect the walls themselves to whisper secrets from winters long past. A servant named Magda runs her hand along one of the barrels. Ale, she murmurs, smiling faintly. The good kind. Still smells sweet. She taps it affectionately, like an old friend. You realize that in this place, ale isn't luxury, it's survival. It's cleaner than water, full of calories, and, perhaps most importantly, numbs the cold a little. Next to the ale casks stand stacks of sacks, barley, oats, and flour, tied tight with twine. Some have small chew marks near the bottom. You crouch closer and spot movement, a tiny mouse darting away. Magda curses under her breath. Thieves, she hisses, but she doesn't mean people. The war between humans and rodents is eternal. And in the winter cellars, it's fought with traps, cats, and desperation. Every grain counts. You hear the steward ordering repairs to the grain bins, his voice sharp and anxious. If the mice win, he says, we'll all lose. You move deeper into the cellar. The temperature drops until you can see your breath like wisps of smoke. Here are the cheeses, round and pale, aging quietly on wooden shelves. Some are speckled with mold, a good kind. The cook says, but you're not convinced. The smell is overwhelming, sharp and sour, but oddly comforting. That's how you know it'll last. Magda assures you. Bad smell. Good sign. Then come the barrels of pickled vegetables, onions, turnips, cabbage, all swimming in brine. You pop open one lid, and the scent rushes out like a slap, acidic, pungent, alive. Careful, she says, laughing. That's last summer in a jar. You imagine the people who made it months ago, sweating in the harvest sun, never guessing how precious those jars would become. Farther in, the light dims until the edges of the cellar blur into darkness. You spot a door half hidden behind a curtain of cobwebs. It's smaller than the others. Almost forgotten. The steward notices your gaze. That, he says quietly, is for emergencies. He pushes it open, and a chill drafts out like a sigh. Inside, the shelves are nearly bare, only a few jars of dried peas. A couple of salted fish. A half bag of grain. This is the reserve, he explains. We don't touch it unless the main stores fail. His voice drops lower. Last winter, we opened it in February. Barely made it through March. You feel a prickle along your neck. The idea of running out here, in a stone fortress surrounded by snow and silence, is terrifying. Outside, you could hunt or forage. In here, there's nothing but walls. Still, the people in this castle know the rhythm of scarcity like a song. They've learned to pace themselves, to eat less in early winter and save the best for the lean months. There's even a kind of ceremony in it. On certain nights, the steward measures the stores and announces how long they might last. It's both reassurance and quiet dread. Magda hands you a lantern and gestures toward a back alcove. Want to see the wine? She asks. Grinning, You follow her through a low archway where rows of bottles lie like sleeping soldiers. Some are dusty and ancient, sealed with wax that's cracked from age. This one, she says, tapping a dark green bottle, was poured before I was born. The Lord saves it for when the snow melts. You can't help but think of the irony, celebrating survival with something made years before the struggle began. History, it seems, ferments too. She opens a small flask and offers you a sip of ale. It's flat but warm, with a faint sweetness that coats your tongue. To the cellar, she says, raising her cup, and to everything we haven't eaten yet. You clink your mug against hers. The sound soft and hollow in the damp air. When you climb back up to the hall, the world feels different. The cellar stays with you, a reminder that beneath every medieval castle, beneath the banners and armor and pride, lay the real heart of survival, quiet, cold, and full of salted hope. That night, as the fire crackles in the great hall, you find yourself thinking about those jars and barrels resting in the dark. The way people trusted them. The way entire winters hung by their lids. You picture the castle centuries from now, ruined, moss-covered, open to the sky. The stones will crumble, but maybe, just maybe, a sealed jar will survive somewhere down there, waiting patiently, still holding the ghost of a summer long gone. And somehow, that thought feels strangely comforting. You take a sip of ale, listening to the low hum of conversation around you. The warmth spreads through your chest like a small, steady flame. For now, the castle still breathes. And so do you. The next few days blend together. One long blur of gray mornings and smoky nights. Outside, the snow no longer falls gently, it crashes against the walls in thick waves. As if winter itself is trying to break in. The castle feels smaller now. Every room filled with the same stale air and the same quiet murmurs of hunger. You sit by the hearth, watching the flames twist and sputter. The cook ladles something from a pot into wooden bowls. It's soup, but calling it that feels generous. It's a thin, cloudy broth dotted with bits of barley and the ghosts of vegetables long gone. Eat before it cools, she says. Once it's cold, it'll taste like sadness. You laugh softly, though she isn't joking. The heat from the bowl warms your fingers. The smell faintly earthy and bitter. You take a sip and close your eyes. It's not delicious, not even good, but it's enough. And in this place, that's worth more than flavor. Across the table, two guards spoon the soup in silence. Their armor is stacked beside them, dulled by frost and neglect. One of them, a man with a scar across his cheek, finally speaks. Last winter, he says, we ran out of onions by January. After that, even the soup stopped pretending to have taste. The others chuckled dryly. At least we still had ale. Someone mutters. A drunk stomach doesn't complain. You can tell that every bowl of broth here carries its own story. The cook stirs the pot constantly, scraping the bottom so nothing sticks. She drops in a bone, stripped bare, but still valuable for the fat clinging to it. Makes it richer, she insists, though no one asks richer than what. The soup bubbles quietly, sending thin wisps of steam into the air. The smell spreads through the hall, faintly comforting, faintly desperate. For a brief moment, it feels like community, the kind that can only be built around shared hunger. You dip another spoonful and look closer. There's something in the way people eat here, not with greed, but reverence. Every bite is taken slowly, almost solemnly, as though acknowledging the effort that went into making it possible. Somewhere, in the back of your mind, you realize that this isn't just food. It's a survival ritual. Outside, the wind howls. Inside, spoons scrape bowls. That's winter's rhythm now. Later, you follow the cook back to the kitchen. She lifts the lid of another pot, a stew in progress. For the Lord's table, she explains, it's thicker, darker, richer in smell. You spot chunks of meat floating near the surface. Rabbit, she says, or something that used to be one. Then she grins. Don't look too close. Even the nobles' meals aren't as grand as they once were. Spices are used sparingly. Fat is rationed, and every drop of broth is saved. Still, compared to the servants' fare, it's a feast. The disparity doesn't cause anger here, just resignation. Everyone knows their place in the great food chain of stone. You think of how strange it is, in times of plenty. People crave flavor, in times of famine. They crave texture. The difference between soup and stew isn't just thickness, it's hope. That night, a servant named Lena sits near you, nursing a cup of warm ale. She's young, maybe 16, her hands red from scrubbing pots. When I was small, she says softly, my grandmother told me that soup tastes better if you sing to it while it boils. You smile. Did she mean it? Lena shrugs. Didn't matter. It made her smile. There's something beautiful in that, a kind of defiance. You imagine her grandmother humming over a pot, refusing to let silence and hunger have the final word. The cook interrupts your thoughts. Here, she says, handing you a small bowl of something new. Soup of desperation. You raise an eyebrow. Is that the real name? It is now, she replies. Inside the bowl floats what looks like a medley of roots. Maybe an old carrot, maybe something pretending to be one. The broth is murky but smells faintly of garlic. You take a cautious sip. It's salty, smoky, slightly bitter, but not bad. You nod appreciatively. See? The cook says. Proud. Desperation breeds creativity. She isn't wrong. When ingredients run low, people improvise. Leftover bones are reboiled until they surrender their last flavor. Herbs, even dried ones, are hoarded like treasure. And if nothing remains, water becomes a meal. People sip it slowly, eyes closed, pretending it's something more. In one corner of the kitchen, a pot of porridge simmers, barley, water, and a pinch of salt. The smell is faintly nutty. The sound soft and hypnotic. The cook says it's for the children and the elderly, the ones who shouldn't have to chew too hard. You watch her ladle out portions, each bowl handed over with quiet care. It's not generosity, it's duty. In this castle, kindness survives not as sentiment, but as structure. Without it, the whole fragile system would collapse. When everyone has eaten, she scrapes the pot clean. Nothing wasted, she murmurs, pouring the last dribble of broth into a small jar. Tomorrow's soup begins with today's. The logic is simple, almost poetic. Every meal carries a memory of the one before it, just as every survivor carries the ghost of last winter. You leave the kitchen and step into the corridor. The air is colder here. The silence thicker. Somewhere upstairs, you hear laughter, soft, distant, fleeting. You think about how warmth in this place doesn't just come from fire. It comes from people sitting close, sharing what little they have, turning scarcity into ritual, ritual into survival. You pause by a window slit and peer out. The moon hangs low over the courtyard, pale as bone. The snow has stopped falling, but the wind still whispers through the towers, making the walls moan softly. You whisper to yourself, half a thought, half a prayer. May the soup never run out. The words fade, but the warmth of them lingers. In the distance, a dog barks once, then quiets. Somewhere deep in the castle, another pot begins to boil. The rhythm continues. By the next morning, the world outside has turned utterly white. The snow is so deep that even the tallest trees in the distance look like ghosts. Their branches bowed and brittle. The castle walls creak as if complaining under the weight of frost. Inside, the fire never truly dies. Someone always tends it, feeding it small scraps of wood like offerings to a god of warmth. You stretch your arms and rub the chill from your shoulders. The air smells faintly sour, like pickled vegetables and smoke. It's the smell of winter survival, half rot, half hope. In the kitchen, the mood is restless. The cook, eyes ringed with exhaustion, stands before a table scattered with jars and bowls. Today is Vegetable Day, though that title feels almost ironic. Fresh vegetables haven't existed here for weeks. What remains are things that refused to die: root vegetables, pickles, and anything tough enough to last through frost. You watch as she opens a large clay jar, its rim crusted with salt. A strong smell immediately fills the air: vinegar, cabbage, and the faint sweetness of decay. Pickled turnips. You fight the urge to wrinkle your nose. Still good, the cook says, half to herself. She fishes one out with a wooden fork and bites into it. The crunch echoes through the hall. A bit sharp, she says, grimacing, but better than air. You smile faintly. In the Middle Ages, vegetables were precious, not for flavor, but for survival. When the ground froze, people turned to whatever could be stored underground or sealed in jars. Turnips, carrots, leeks, and onions were winter's lifeline. They were dried, salted, or buried in sand to stay edible for as long as possible. But time is cruel to produce. No matter how well preserved, vegetables shriveled, softened, or soured. You run your finger along the jar's rim and imagine how desperate someone must have been to invent pickling, willing to drown food in vinegar just to keep it from disappearing. A young boy enters carrying a basket lined with straw. Inside are a few wrinkled apples, spotted but intact. Found these in the bottom of the barrel, he says proudly. The cook ruffles his hair. Miracles still happen. She slices one open and divides it among the kitchen staff. You get a piece too. It's soft, mealy, and tart, but the sweetness, faint as it is, feels like sunlight. For a few moments, everyone stops working. They stand quietly, chewing, savoring. One of the guards lets out a small laugh. Imagine explaining this to someone from the future. He says, they'd throw away apples like these without a thought. Then they'd freeze by Christmas. Someone replies, and laughter ripples again. It's small but real. In the corner, another servant tends to a crate filled with sand. She brushes it aside, revealing long, pale roots buried within. Parsnips, she says softly. still alive. The cook claps her hands in delight. We'll roast them tonight. The Lord will think it's a feast. You watch as they lift the vegetables from the crate, shaking off the sand like rescuing old friends. Each root feels oddly personal, a survivor of its own little war against time. When they roast, the smell is heavenly, earthy and sweet, with a hint of smoke. The cook sprinkles salt over them sparingly, as if blessing them. The sound of crackling fat fills the air. And for once, the kitchen feels alive. But not everything goes right. In one corner, a jar of pickled leeks has turned cloudy. The cook frowns, lifts the lid, and immediately waves a hand. Spoiled, she mutters. Don't breathe too close, or you'll regret it. She dumps it into a bucket and sighs. We can't save everything. Her words hang in the air, heavier than they should. Everyone knows she isn't just talking about leeks. Later, as the roasted parsnips are served in the great hall, you sit among the servants. The warmth from the hearth is weak but welcome. The food is simple, but it carries a strange dignity. Each bite feels earned. You think of the farmers who pulled these roots from the ground months ago. Their hands raw and numb, working before dawn to fill carts that would one day feed strangers. A historian might later say the medieval diet was bland and repetitive. But sitting here, you realize that's not the point. It wasn't about pleasure, it was about rhythm. About knowing that after every harvest, every storm, every famine, people still found ways to keep the fire burning and the pot boiling. One of the old women at the table chuckles, breaking the silence. They say in some villages, people buried their cabbages under the floorboards to keep them fresh. Under the floor? You ask? Oh yes, she nods. One poor soul forgot and lived with the smell until spring. Laughter bursts around the table again, echoing off the walls. Even the guards smile. It's strange how easily laughter survives famine. Maybe because it's cheaper than salt. When the meal ends, you wander outside. The air bites your skin, sharp as needles. You walk past the frozen well. Its rim rimmed with ice. The garden beyond the walls lies buried, a smooth white field of memory. Somewhere beneath it, the soil sleeps, dreaming of roots and rain. You imagine the first green shoots that will appear when the thaw comes, tiny, fragile, defiant, just like the people who live here. As you turn back toward the castle, you notice the thin column of smoke rising from the kitchen chimney, twisting into the pale afternoon sky. It looks almost like a prayer, a thin, wavering line between hunger and hope. Inside, you hear someone start to hum, the same tune from nights ago, slow and steady, carrying through the corridors. You hum along, quietly, because in this frozen fortress, even a song can taste like spring. The day begins with a low toll of the chapel bell, its sound muted by snow, yet still solemn enough to pull everyone from their beds. It's Friday, a fasting day, and that means no meat. You pull your cloak tighter, already knowing what this implies, the return of fish. You make your way to the kitchen, where the smell greets you before the warmth does. It's sharp, salty, and faintly, well, fishy. The cook stands near a barrel, prying open the lid with a knife. The stench escapes in a rush that could probably wake the dead. Ah, she says, smiling grimly, the saints have provided. Inside the barrel lies a pile of salted cod, white, leathery, and stiff as parchment. You lean in cautiously, and the cook chuckles. "Don't worry," she says. "We'll boil it until it forgets who it was." In the Middle Ages, fish wasn't a choice, it was an obligation. The church demanded fasts on nearly half the calendar year. Meat was forbidden, but fish was permitted, so people learned to live by the sea even if they never saw it. And here, far inland, salted and dried fish traveled hundreds of miles packed in barrels just like this, transforming into something that barely resembled food but was eaten with faith nonetheless. The servants drag a few planks of frozen fish toward the fire. It thaws slowly, dripping salt water onto the stones. The smell intensifies. Someone mutters, "Even the cats won't touch it yet." The cook ignores him and begins her ritual. She breaks the pieces apart, drops them into a pot, and fills it with water. The fish will soak for hours, sometimes overnight, to leach out enough salt to be chewable again. "If you don't soak it right," she explains, "you'll wake up thirstier than a pilgrim in the desert." You watch as she adds herbs, dried parsley, a sprig of thyme, and something that might once have been garlic. "For the taste," she says, though the tone of her voice suggests skepticism. Still, the scent slowly shifts from harsh salt to something almost edible. By midday, the kitchen is alive again. Steam rises in white clouds, fogging the windows and turning everyone's hair damp. Servants bustle back and forth, carrying bowls and loaves of bread to soak up the fish broth. The sound of clinking spoons and crackling fire fills the room, drowning out the wind outside. The cook hands you a bowl. The broth is pale and thin, with a few floating herbs and shreds of rehydrated fish. You take a cautious sip. It's salty but warm, surprisingly comforting. Hunger, it seems, can season anything. A young monk visiting from the nearby abbey joins the meal. His robe is patched, his hands red from cold. "You're lucky," he says between bites. "Our brothers have eaten nothing but eels for 2 weeks." You raise an eyebrow. "Eels?" He nods seriously. "They multiply in the ponds near the monastery. God's mercy, they say, though after the 5th day, it feels more like penance." Everyone laughs, the sound mingling with the hiss of the boiling pot. Fish days blur the line between faith and survival. You think about how the church's rules shaped not only belief but cuisine itself. Without fasting, there'd be no salted cod trade, no pickled herring, no desperate inventiveness. Necessity and piety, strange bedfellows in a freezing castle. The cook lifts a ladle and tastes the broth again. "Needs more something," she mutters. "Maybe a prayer." She sends a boy to fetch the last of the onions from the cellar. He returns with 2 small ones. Their skins paper thin and wrinkled. She chops them carefully, reverently almost, and drops them into the pot. The smell improves instantly, filling the kitchen with a fragile sense of abundance. Later, when the meal is served in the great hall, you notice how different people react. The nobles at the high table dip their spoons delicately, murmuring thanks to God for the sea's bounty. The servants eat quickly, not out of disrespect but because warmth is fleeting and hunger waits for no sermon. A bard begins to strum a slow tune by the fire. The song is about Saint Peter, the fisherman who fed the hungry. You listen as his voice rises and falls, soft as the waves the castle will never see. The rhythm of it seeps into your bones. Halfway through the song, The cook leans toward you and whispers, "You know, they say fish never fills the belly. That's why monks eat it so often, keeps them humble." She smirks. "I think it just keeps them thin." You laugh quietly, earning a glare from one of the older servants who clearly takes fasting more seriously. Still, there's a shared warmth in the room. A unity that comes from eating the same simple food for the same simple reason, to endure. When the bowls are empty, the cook pours the remaining broth into a smaller pot. "For supper," she says, "waste not." Then, more softly, almost to herself, "We never know when the next barrel will arrive." You glance out the narrow window slit. The snow has stopped, but the world remains locked in ice. Somewhere beyond those frozen hills, fishermen pull their nets through black water, catching food for people they'll never meet. There's something deeply human about that thought. A chain of survival stretching across miles of frozen land and sea. All connected by salt and hunger. As evening falls, the great hall glows gold with firelight. The smell of fish has faded, replaced by the faint sweetness of burning pine. You sit quietly, belly half full, heart oddly at peace. And for just a moment, you can almost imagine the sea. The sound of waves, the cry of gulls, the endless horizon where winter can't reach. Then a gust of cold wind slips through the cracks in the wall. And you're back in the castle again, stone, smoke, and the steady pulse of survival. You pull your cloak tighter, smile faintly, and whisper, "See you next Friday." Cod. By the time the sun rises again, if you can even call it that, the castle has sunk into a kind of gray monotony. The cold has won, the walls sweat with frost. And even the fires seem tired of burning. No one talks much anymore. Words take too much energy. You wake to the sound of a wooden spoon scraping the bottom of a pot. That sound, once ordinary, now feels almost cruel. You know it means there isn't much left. When you make your way to the kitchen, the air feels heavier, as though the very stones are holding their breath. The cook stands at the table, stirring a pot of something that barely qualifies as stew. It's thick but strange, uneven in color, smelling faintly of roots and smoke. "Pottage," she says when she sees you. Everyone's favorite. Her voice carries both pride and irony. You've heard the word before, pottage. The eternal meal of the Middle Ages. Not quite soup, not quite porridge, but something in between, a constant companion of both the poor and the desperate. She ladles some into a bowl. "Everything goes in," she explains. "Grain, dried peas, old meat if we've got it. If we don't, well, whatever's left." You take a bite. It's thick, earthy, oddly comforting. The flavor changes with every spoonful, sometimes nutty, sometimes bitter, sometimes entirely unidentifiable. "So it's never the same twice?" you ask. "Exactly," she says, smiling faintly. "That's what makes it interesting." In truth, pottage was the beating heart of medieval survival. It wasn't just food, it was a process. Each day, the pot stayed simmering on the hearth. Ingredients added and removed as needed. The stew became a living thing, absorbing yesterday's scraps and tomorrow's hopes. The cook gestures toward the pot. "We've kept this one going for a week now. Haven't cleaned it once. The more it ages, the better it tastes." You raise an eyebrow. "Doesn't that make it dangerous?" She shrugs. "Everything's dangerous in winter." Might as well eat something that tastes familiar. You can't argue with that. The kitchen fills slowly as the others drift in. No one rushes. The smell of pottage is humble, inviting, almost nostalgic. The servants take turns filling their bowls, sitting close to the fire as they eat. There's a rhythm to it now: eat, warm hands, rest, repeat. A guard breaks the silence. Remember last winter, when we found that sack of peas behind the barrels? The cook snorts. Half of them were rocks. Didn't stop us from eating them. Laughter, thin but real, passes around the room. Even the youngest servant giggles, stirring her bowl as if hoping the next spoonful will taste like spring. You sit there quietly, watching them. There's something strangely beautiful about it, the simplicity, the resilience. Every person in this room has given up something: taste, comfort, dignity, but they've kept their humor. Somehow, that feels more valuable than food. Later, you follow the cook outside to fetch water. The courtyard is silent except for the crunch of your boots on snow. The well is still frozen, so she breaks the surface with a hammer, muttering curses that sound half like prayers. When she hauls the bucket up, her hands are red and raw. "Do you ever get used to it?" you ask. She glances at you. "The cold?" You nod. "No," she says, "but you learn to respect it. Same as hunger. Same as fire." When you return inside, the smell of pottage fills the air again. It's thicker now, darker. The cook adds a bone to it, the marrow melting into the stew. "This," she says softly, "is how you make warmth taste like something." The hours pass in slow motion. People drift in and out, adding a handful of barley here, a scrap of turnip there. The stew changes color again, becoming something new without ever becoming better. It's not food anymore, it's ritual. The pot never stops bubbling, never stops whispering that life goes on. You realize something, sitting there beside the fire. The pottage is a perfect metaphor for winter survival. It doesn't need to be good. It just needs to keep going. The cook must see your expression because she chuckles. You're thinking too hard. Eat. Think later. So you do. By nightfall, the hall is quiet again. The last of the stew is ladled out. The pot scraped clean, only to be refilled with water and a promise for tomorrow. The fire burns low, its glow flickering across faces that have long stopped dreaming of feasts. Someone starts humming, a lullaby this time. Low and tender, the same tune, passed from day to day. Like warmth itself, the sound fills the room softly. Like a blanket. You lean back against the wall, your stomach not quite full, your heart not quite empty. The pottage sits heavy inside you, anchoring you to this moment, to this strange, quiet persistence that defines the castle. Outside, the wind moans across the frozen moat, rattling the shutters like bones. But inside, there's still fire, still breath, still soup simmering for tomorrow. And that, somehow, feels like enough. You close your eyes and murmur into the flickering air. Here's to the stew that never dies. The fire crackles in reply. Days pass, and time begins to lose its shape. Each morning feels like the last. Each night an echo of the one before. The fire still burns. The pottage still simmers. And the wind outside keeps howling like it's trying to erase everything human. You stop counting days because counting means expecting change. And winter doesn't care about your expectations. It's sometime after dawn, though the light is barely distinguishable from twilight, when you first hear the whisper of something new, the talk of substitutes. The cook stands near the hearth, staring at a table that looks strangely bare. No bread, no grain, just a small pile of odd things, bark, dried leaves, and what looks suspiciously like shredded leather. She sighs deeply. We're out of flour. You stare at her. Completely? She nods. Completely. The rats have done better this winter than we have. There's a pause, and then one of the servants mutters, "So what now?" The cook gives a crooked smile. "Now we get creative. And that's how you learn about strange substitutes, the quiet miracles and small horrors people used when winter went too far." She tears a strip of dried bark and tosses it into the fire. "Birch bark," she says, "boiled and ground. It can pass for flour if you don't think too hard about it." You're not sure whether to laugh or despair. Soon, the kitchen becomes an experiment in desperation. Someone grinds acorns into coarse powder. Another scrapes moss from stones and washes it carefully. The cook soaks leather scraps from old boots, softening them until they can be chewed. It's not as bad as it sounds. She insists. Mostly. The smell of these inventions is indescribable. Bitter, earthy, faintly burned. It doesn't smell like food. But it smells like effort, and that counts for something. By midday, the bread is ready. The loaves are small, gray, and dense enough to dent a table. When you cut one open, the inside looks like wood pulp. The cook sets one before you proudly. "Try it," she says. You take a cautious bite. It's chewy, fibrous, and tastes faintly of the forest floor. "Interesting. You manage." Chewing slowly. She smirks. Interesting is just another word for survival. That night, a new smell joins the castle air. Roasted roots that aren't quite potatoes and herbs that were never meant to be eaten. People eat quietly, politely, pretending not to notice when their jaws ache from chewing. Even the Lord's table feels the scarcity now. The feast days are over. The venison gone, the wine watered down. You overhear the steward whispering to the cook. The master has asked for something different, something inventive. The cook's laugh has no humor. Tell him invention died with the last onion. Still, she tries. The next day she presents a dish she calls winter pudding, a strange gray lump made from dried apples, oats, and something she refuses to name. The Lord declares it surprisingly pleasant. The servants exchange looks that say everything. By evening, the talk around the hearth turns darker. One man recalls a siege he survived years ago. "We boiled the leather from the shields," he says. "Then the belts. Then," he stops there. The silence afterward is heavy, broken only by the fire's soft crackle. The cook clears her throat and says lightly, "At least we've still got salt." "Not much," the steward replies. Her face tightens, but she doesn't respond. Later, you find her alone in the kitchen, staring into the fire. "It's strange," she says softly, "how quickly you forget what real food tastes like. After a while, even boiled bark feels normal. The body adapts. The mind, not so much." You sit beside her in silence. The warmth feels different tonight, smaller, weaker, like it's stretching itself thin to last just a little longer. She points at the embers. When I was little, my grandmother said fire and hunger are the same thing. Feed them, or they eat you. You nod. Which one wins here? She smiles faintly. Ask me in spring. The wind outside picks up, moaning through the cracks in the shutters. The walls creak in reply. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once, then falls silent. You look down at your hands and notice the faint scent of smoke that never leaves your skin now. It's in everything: your clothes, your hair, your dreams. The castle has turned into a living organism of hunger and fire. Breathing shallowly, waiting. Before bed, you nibble one of the bark loaves again, more out of ritual than appetite. It doesn't taste any better the second time, but it keeps you grounded. It reminds you that even when everything else fades, color, taste, warmth, the will to survive lingers stubbornly. As you lie down, you hear the cook in the next room humming quietly. That same half-song, half-prayer everyone seems to know now. It drifts through the cold air, curling around the stones like smoke. And for a moment, the castle doesn't feel like a tomb. It feels like a promise, a fragile one, but still breathing. You whisper to the dark, "Let us make it through one more day." Outside, the wind answers, dragging its icy fingers across the walls like a sigh. Inside, you dream of trees, bark, yes, but alive, green, full of leaves. Morning arrives without sound, as if even the world outside is holding its breath. You wake to a castle quieter than you've ever heard it. No clatter from the kitchens. No footsteps in the corridor. Not even the usual groaning of the gates in the wind. The fire in your chamber has gone out, leaving only the faint smell of cold ash. You pull on your cloak and step into the hallway. The stones are icy underfoot, slick with frost that has crept in through the cracks. Your breath leaves pale ghosts behind you as you walk. Somewhere, far below, you hear a single voice murmuring a prayer. It takes a moment to realize what day it is. A holy day. Another fast. The irony doesn't escape you. When food is scarce enough to begin with, a fast feels redundant. Still, the church's calendar rules everything, even hunger. Today, the people of the castle will eat no meat, no fat, no dairy, and so, the cook must once again perform miracles with nothing. When you enter the kitchen, she's already at work. A pot simmers over the fire, its contents thin and gray. The smell is faintly herbal, faintly smoky, an echo of food rather than the thing itself. "Fish again?" you ask. She shakes her head. "Not even that today. We're making what I call faith soup." You peer into the pot. "What's in it?" She shrugs. "Water, a few beans, a blessing, and whatever God remembers we forgot." The servants chuckle softly. Humor is the only seasoning left. You sit near the hearth and watch her stir. The fire crackles weakly. Even the flames look tired, as if the wood itself has run out of willpower. Still, there's something comforting about the sound. It's proof that life continues, however faintly. The cook begins ladling portions into bowls, small ones this time. Barely half full. "The Lord's table first," she says automatically, though no one needs reminding. You watch as the bowls disappear into the hands of servants bound for the upper hall. When your turn comes, she gives you a bowl and meets your eyes. "Eat slowly," she says. "Pretend it's filling." You nod and take a sip. The broth is warm but watery. with the faintest flavor of herbs and salt. It's not satisfying, but it keeps the ache in your stomach from becoming unbearable. Across from you, a guard mutters, "If we eat any less, we'll start praying for snow to eat." The cook shoots him a look. "Careful what you wish for. Snow melts fast." Despite the grimness, a ripple of laughter runs through the room. Laughter doesn't feed anyone, but it does something almost as important: it keeps the cold from settling too deep inside. Later, as the meal ends, you see the cook set aside a small bowl and cover it with cloth. For the sick boy, she explains, he hasn't eaten in 2 days. She hesitates, then adds softly, "If he wakes." No one answers. Outside, the air is brittle and sharp. You walk to the courtyard. Boots crunching on the ice. The world looks carved from stone and silence. The snow glitters under a pale sun that gives no warmth at all. From the towers, you can see the distant hills swallowed in mist. Nothing moves, not a bird, not a leaf, not even the smoke from the chimneys. You realize that winter has entered its deep phase, the point where time itself seems frozen. Days and nights blend together, and the hunger inside the walls becomes something more than physical. It's a presence, an invisible guest at every table. Back in the hall, the Lord's family sits by the fire. Even their feast is meager now, a few slices of dried fish. A heel of bread, watered wine. You can see the worry in the Lord's eyes as he talks quietly with his steward. "We have enough for another week," the steward says. After that, he doesn't finish. The Lord nods once, slowly. "Then we pray for thaw." You look around the hall, the fading banners, the dim firelight, the faces drawn tight with fatigue, and realize how thin the line between nobility and starvation truly is. Titles don't warm hands, coins don't fill bellies. In the end, everyone in this fortress is equal before the hunger that hums behind the stone walls. That night, as the castle settles into uneasy sleep, you wander back toward the kitchen. The embers glow faintly, and the cook sits alone at the table, staring into the fire. Her hands are clasped, her face unreadable. "Couldn't sleep?" you ask. She shakes her head. "I keep thinking about the beans." "The beans?" "There were only a handful left. I counted. I told myself they'd stretch farther if I prayed over them." She laughs softly, but it isn't a happy sound. "I think I was wrong." You sit beside her in silence. The fire snaps quietly. Smoke coils upward and disappears into the chimney. After a moment, she says, "Do you know what hunger really is?" You wait. "It's not emptiness," she says. "It's memory. Your body remembers what it used to have and mourns it." She pokes at the fire. Eyes distant. "We're all just remembering together." The flames dance in her pupils, reflecting a warmth that feels older than the castle itself. For a fleeting moment, the world feels almost gentle again. You both sit there until the fire fades to red. When she finally speaks again, her voice is soft, almost tender. "Tomorrow," she says, "we'll find something. We always do." You nod, though you're not sure she's talking to you. As you leave, the last light of the embers paints her face in gold and shadow. You realize she's right. Winter doesn't take everything at once. It just keeps asking for a little more each day. And people keep giving until the giving becomes habit. Up in your chamber, the cold waits patiently. Coiled in the corners, you crawl beneath your blanket, listening to the wind stroke the walls like a restless animal. And before sleep takes you, you whisper the words everyone in this castle is thinking, even if they never say them aloud. Let tomorrow find us still here. The morning begins not with sound but with silence so complete it feels unnatural. Even the wind seems to have vanished, as though the world itself is exhausted. When you open your eyes, the air feels heavier than usual, thick, cold, unmoving. The candle beside your bed has burned down to a stub, and the wick still smokes faintly, whispering the scent of spent wax. You rise slowly, half expecting to hear the usual chorus of clattering pots and murmured prayers from the kitchen below. But there's nothing, only the creak of wood, the occasional groan of the castle as it settles deeper into the frost. It's too quiet. When you step into the corridor, your breath fogs instantly. Frost crystals lace the walls, glittering like stars in the dim morning light. You pull your cloak tighter and make your way downstairs, boots slipping on the frozen steps. The first sound that reaches you is chanting, a low, rhythmic hum echoing from the chapel. You follow it. The door is half open, and a handful of monks from the nearby abbey kneel at the altar, their voices rising and falling like slow waves. The air smells faintly of smoke and beeswax. Their prayers blend into the cold like breath into mist. It takes you a moment to realize they're reciting one of the psalms, something about endurance and patience. The same words they've likely said every winter for years. Afterward, one of the monks, an elderly man with a face as creased as old parchment, approaches you. You look hungry, he says kindly. You almost laugh. Everyone does. He nods, unsurprised. We've seen winters worse than this. He says, faith helps, not in the way people think, not as a miracle, but as a rhythm. When your stomach's empty, you pray in its place. You follow him to the small side door of the chapel. Beyond it lies a narrow passage that leads to their quarters within the castle, a modest corner warmed by a single brazier. On a table sits a loaf of coarse bread and a small wheel of cheese. The smell is faint but heavenly. The monk slices the bread carefully, reverently, as if handling relics. He offers you a piece. Eat, he says simply. You take it. The bread is dense, sour, and dry, but you don't care. You chew slowly, the way one might savor a memory. Thank you, you murmur. He smiles. Thank God, not me. We just tend his garden. It takes you a moment to realize what he means. You glance around the chamber and notice clay jars lining the wall, each one filled with dried herbs, beans, and something that looks like pickled roots. The garden? You ask. He nods proudly. Our monastery keeps a small greenhouse by the south wall. We use glass panes and warm stones to keep some plants alive through winter. Not much, but enough. You're stunned. You grow food? In this cold? He laughs softly. Food? Hardly. Medicine? Mostly. But sometimes we cheat. Leeks. Onions. A few hardy greens. The Lord doesn't forbid cleverness. His humor feels like sunlight in this frozen place. Another monk enters, carrying a small jug. Beer, he says, smiling. The good kind. The brothers made it last summer. He pours some into a wooden cup and hands it to you. The drink is warm, thick, and sweet with honey. It tastes like comfort, like something made by people who still remember joy. The older monk sits beside you. You see, he says, we live by moderation. Too much food dulls the soul. Too little dulls the body. So we aim for the middle. Even in famine. You nod, feeling the warmth spread through you. You make it sound simple. He chuckles. It isn't, but neither is dying. The room falls quiet again, filled only by the soft pop of the brazier's coals. The peace here feels different from the castle above, less desperate. More deliberate. These monks have found a rhythm in deprivation. A balance between hunger and grace. You realize that faith, in this place, isn't loud or triumphant. It's patient. It's the steady hum beneath everything else. The same hum that keeps the walls standing and the hearts inside them beating. When you stand to leave, the old monk presses something into your hand, a small pouch of dried herbs. For the cook, he says, tell her to steep it in broth. It won't fill the stomach, but it will warm the spirit. You thank him, promising to deliver it. As you step back into the corridor, the air feels slightly lighter, though it's no warmer. The castle still groans with the same weary noises, but now they sound less like suffering and more like persistence. The kitchen is awake again when you return. The cook stands by the hearth, brow furrowed, as she stirs a pot of thin broth. Back from confession? She teases. From kindness, you answer, handing her the pouch. She opens it and sniffs. Ah, monk's mint. Haven't seen this in years. She tosses a pinch into the pot. The smell that rises is sharp and clean, like the first breath of spring. Everyone nearby lifts their heads. For a moment, the air feels alive again. See, she says, smiling faintly, even a prayer tastes better with herbs. That evening, as the hall fills with the scent of the monk's mint and the warmth of shared bowls, you realize something profound. Survival isn't just about food or fire. It's about meaning, about believing that the act of enduring, of stirring a pot, lighting a candle, saying a prayer, is worth doing at all. When the last spoon scrapes the bowl, someone murmurs softly, "Thanks be to God." The words don't sound like ritual anymore. They sound like truth. You lift your cup in quiet agreement. To faith, you whisper. The cook nods, eyes glinting in the firelight. And to clever monks. Outside, the snow keeps falling, but inside, for the first time in weeks, it doesn't feel so heavy. The next morning greets you with an unfamiliar sound, shouting. Not angry, not fearful, just loud. Frantic voices echoing off the courtyard walls. You throw on your cloak and hurry toward the noise, your boots slipping on the frost. The gate is half open, and a gust of icy wind rushes through. Two guards are struggling with something heavy, a wooden cart crusted in snow. The horses that pulled it are gaunt, their breath steaming like ghosts in the pale light. Behind them, a small group of travelers shivers in silence, wrapped in rags and frost. From the village, one guard explains, wiping his brow, they've come to trade. The word trade sounds almost mythical after so many weeks of isolation. The steward appears moments later, half-dressed, half awake, but fully alert. What could they possibly have? He asks. Turnips, says one of the villagers, his voice rough with cold. And grain? What's left of it? We'll sell cheap. The steward frowns. And what do you want in return? The man hesitates. Salt, or ale. His eyes dart nervously toward the cart. Please, our children. The cook, who has arrived just behind you, steps forward. Let them in, she says. We can spare a little of both. For a moment, the steward looks ready to argue. But something in her tone stops him. The gate opens fully, and the villagers are ushered inside. The exchange takes place in the courtyard under a sky the color of old iron. The air smells faintly of smoke and horses. The villagers unload their offerings, dirty sacks of grain, a few crates of shriveled root vegetables, and one small barrel of dried peas. It doesn't look like much. But to everyone watching, it might as well be treasure. The cook kneels beside a sack, running her hands through the grain. It's rough, uneven, mixed with bits of straw, but edible. Good enough, she says. Better than good enough. The steward orders a few jugs of ale brought from the cellar. The villagers clutch them like lifelines. You notice their faces, pale, hollow-eyed, but grateful. They bow repeatedly as they leave, disappearing back into the snow like shadows returning to the white void. When the gates close again, the cook exhales deeply. We'll stretch this for a week. Maybe more, she says. Miracles come in carts, apparently. By midday, the castle hums with cautious optimism. The kitchen bursts into life again, the air filled with movement and sound. The cook and her helpers sort through the grain, grinding it, sifting out debris, singing under their breath. Even the fire seems to burn brighter today. You help peel a few turnips, small, wrinkled things, their skins tough as leather. They don't look like much. You say. The cook grins. Then they'll fit right in. She throws them into a pot along with barley and a few herbs from the monk's pouch. The smell that rises is different from anything you've smelled in weeks. It's not rich, not luxurious, but it's fresh. The scent of something new. Something almost alive. By evening, the castle gathers in the great hall. The fire is roaring again. The shadows softer. People speak louder, laugh more easily. The guards drink ale without guilt for once. The cook moves among them with bowls of steaming stew, her cheeks flushed from the heat. When she hands you yours, she says, "Careful, it's real food. Might shock your system." You take a spoonful and blink. It's good, actually good. The sweetness of the turnips, the chew of the barley, the faint warmth of the herbs. It all comes together in a way that makes your chest tighten. Not because of hunger, but because you'd forgotten what satisfaction felt like. The sound of spoons on bowls fills the hall. Even the Lord and his family eat with less ceremony tonight, smiling faintly at the sight of their people alive and laughing. After dinner, someone begins to play a lute. The tune is slow but hopeful, winding through the hall like a memory of summer. A few people hum along. The cook leans against a pillar, eyes half closed, listening. "You see," she says softly, "all it takes is a cart, a handful of turnips, and people willing to share." You nod, watching the firelight flicker over her face. Feels like the worst has passed. She smiles, but it's tired, cautious. That's what people always say before the next storm. You glance toward the window. Outside, the snow glows faintly in the moonlight, soft and still, for the first time in months. It doesn't look threatening, it looks peaceful. You almost believe her wrong. Later, when the hall empties, you linger by the dying fire. The smell of stew still hangs in the air, mingling with wood smoke and ale. It feels warmer than it should, richer somehow. You think of the villagers trudging home through the night, their cart empty but their bellies full of ale. You wonder if they'll make it, if their own fires are still burning. And then it strikes you, how fragile everything is. How survival, in winter, depends on tiny decisions made by tired people. A cook's kindness, a lord's hesitation, a stranger's courage to knock on a frozen gate. The fire crackles softly, the last log splits, sending up a small flare of sparks. You whisper to yourself, let them reach home. The sound fades quickly, but in the quiet that follows, you swear you can almost hear something answering, a low hum. Maybe the wind, maybe the castle itself, murmuring back. So long as there's warmth somewhere, they will. You smile, half believing it. Outside, the snow begins to fall again, softly this time, like a promise rather than a threat. By the time dawn creeps through the narrow windows again, the castle feels quieter but not empty. It's the kind of quiet that comes after relief, when people let themselves rest for the first time in too long. The fires are still burning. The air carries the faint perfume of last night's stew. And somewhere in the distance, someone is humming that same low, steady tune. You stretch your legs and rise, feeling heavier than usual, but in the good way, the way you do when your stomach isn't gnawing at itself. The cook wasn't lying. The cart of turnips really did change everything. But as you step into the corridor, you sense something else lingering in the air. Not fear, just a kind of cautious realism. Because the castle may have been fed, but winter hasn't finished its game yet. Down in the great hall, the steward is already at work, scratching numbers into his ledger. His face is as lined as the parchment. We'll need to ration again, he mutters, half to himself. If the thaw comes late, we could still starve by March. You pour yourself a mug of ale, thinner now, watered down, but it's warm. So no more feasts, then? He chuckles dryly. The word feast is banned until spring. When you step outside, the air bites harder than before. The courtyard glitters with new snow, clean and white, as if trying to trick you into thinking things are pure again. But the cold doesn't lie. The cold always remembers. You walk along the ramparts, your boots crunching softly. From up here, the world looks frozen in time, the forest black and motionless. The river sealed under a crust of glass. A flock of ravens circles lazily over the trees, their cries carrying through the still air. Good omen or bad? A voice says behind you. It's the guard with the scarred cheek. The one who always manages to sound amused, no matter how grim the news. Depends who you ask, you reply. He shrugs. Ravens don't starve. At least, they're smarter than we are. You both laugh, but it's a quiet sound, the kind that fades quickly into the cold. Back in the kitchen, the cook is checking the stores again. Her hair is streaked with ash, her apron stiff with salt and smoke. But she's smiling faintly. You missed breakfast, she says. Barley gruel with a hint of optimism. You grin. What's for lunch? Whatever the ravens don't steal, she says, pointing at the window where two black shapes perch, eyeing the kitchen like inspectors. She throws a wooden spoon at them, and they scatter into the gray sky. Little thieves, she mutters. They're braver than the rats. Despite the bleak humor, the kitchen feels lighter today. The air still carries hunger's memory, but not its desperation. The cook stirs a pot of stew that actually smells hopeful. "We've still got enough grain for another week," she says. "And if the snow melts, maybe the hunters will bring something back." You glance at the floor where the last of the firewood is stacked. "And if it doesn't melt?" She pauses, the spoon hanging motionless in her hand. "Then we make do," she says quietly. "We always make do." She nods toward a shelf where strips of smoked meat hang in the shadows. "See those? From the last hunt before the frost. If the stores run dry, we'll boil them with herbs and call it hunter's stew. People will believe it's special if you say it kindly enough." You smile at that. Words feed people too. She smirks. "Then I must be a saint." By mid-afternoon, a group of villagers arrives at the gate again, this time bringing bundles of firewood and a few scrawny rabbits. The trade is simple: wood for ale, meat for salt. No one haggles too hard. In winter, generosity is its own currency. When the rabbits are skinned and cooking in the pot, the smell fills the kitchen with something like joy. It's faint, fragile, but real. People gather near the hearth, drawn by the promise of flavor. The cook adds herbs from the monk's pouch and a handful of barley. The broth bubbles thickly, sending up curls of steam that shimmer in the firelight. A guard leans close, inhaling deeply. "Smells like we've beaten winter." The cook snorts. "Don't jinx it." He's still watching. "Winter's now?" you ask. She shrugs. "Anyone who takes this much pleasure in making people suffer must be." The laughter that follows is genuine. For a few moments, the room feels almost like a tavern instead of a fortress. Someone starts humming again, then another joins in. And soon the sound becomes a soft, wordless song, the kind people sing without thinking, just to remind themselves they're still human. By the time supper is served, the castle feels alive. The stew is simple but rich, and the ale flows more freely than usual. The Lord even appears, raising his cup to the servants. "To endurance," he says, "and to those who keep this hearth alive." The cook rolls her eyes but bows slightly. You can see the faintest blush of pride beneath the soot on her cheeks. That night, the sky clears for the first time in weeks. Stars scatter across the black like spilled salt, sharp and bright against the cold. You stand at the window, your breath fogging the glass, and feel the smallest, quietest flicker of peace. The world beyond the walls is still frozen, still merciless, but inside the castle, something has shifted. Hope, faint and cautious, has thawed a little corner of the winter. As you turn to leave, the cook passes by, carrying a small candle. "Don't stay up too long," she says. "Tomorrow we start rationing again." You grin. You sound almost cheerful about it. She shrugs. Hope's lighter to carry than despair. You watch her disappear down the corridor, the flame swaying gently in her hand. The light flickers on the stone, casting soft, dancing shadows, proof that even the smallest fire can still push the darkness back. If only for a while. Outside, the ravens are still circling. Inside, the stew still simmers. And for the first time all winter, you truly believe that spring might remember its way back. The first sound you hear that morning isn't wind or footsteps, it's dripping water. You sit up slowly, hardly daring to breathe. For a moment you think you've imagined it. But then it comes again, soft, rhythmic, alive. The thaw has begun. You rush to the window. The world outside still looks frozen, but not entirely dead. The snow along the courtyard walls glistens with a subtle sheen of moisture. Icicles hang from the eaves, and one of them breaks loose, shattering on the stones below with a sound like tiny bells. You smile. It's faint, involuntary, but real. After months of gray silence, the castle is making music again. Down in the kitchen, the atmosphere is electric. The cook stands by the open door, watching the steam rise from the melting snow. Listen, she says, that's the sound of hope melting. Her helpers laugh, half in disbelief. We'll still be hungry for weeks. One mutters. Maybe, she replies, but I'll take water over ice any day. The hearth crackles louder than usual. The fire almost joyful. Buckets of snow are being melted for water. Barrels scrubbed clean in anticipation of something, anything, fresh. The cook hums as she works. And for the first time in what feels like forever, her song doesn't sound like a prayer. It sounds like celebration. You help carry a few of the buckets to the courtyard. The air smells different today, still cold, but no longer bitter. There's something earthy underneath it, something alive, beneath the thin crust of frost. The ground is softening. A guard nearby kneels and presses his hand to the soil. It's wet, he says in awe. Wet, not frozen. Another laughs. Next you'll be telling me birds are coming back. He's right. Not 5 minutes later, a single sparrow darts across the courtyard, wings flashing in the pale light. It lands on the edge of the well and chirps once, a defiant, impossible sound that makes everyone stop. The cook wipes her hands on her apron, grinning. You see? Even the birds are hungry for spring. Inside, the Lord gathers his household in the great hall. The fire is roaring, banners hanging limp in the damp air. The steward announces the good news with his usual solemnity, though even his voice trembles slightly. The river ice has begun to break. He says, by week's end, we may have water flowing again. A murmur runs through the room, a sound like collective relief. No one cheers, they're too tired for that. But people smile at each other in that small, private way that means everything. Afterward, you find the cook preparing something strange. What's that? You ask, watching her grind something pale and fragrant with a stone mortar. Spring soup, she says, eyes gleaming, made with herbs from the monk's garden. The first fresh greens of the year. She pauses, then smirks. Well, fresh enough. You help her carry the pot to the fire. As it boils, the smell fills the kitchen, sharp, green, slightly bitter, but intoxicating after months of salt and smoke. When she ladles out the first bowl, she hands it to you. Careful, she says, it might make you believe in miracles again. You sip, and she's right. It tastes alive, rough and grassy. Yes, but alive. You can almost feel the memory of sunlight in it. People begin drifting in from the corridors, drawn by the scent. Even the Lord's steward sneaks a bowl when he thinks no one's looking. The cook doesn't stop him. Let him, she says quietly. He's earned a little spring too. By afternoon, the courtyard has turned to slush. The sound of dripping water echoes from every wall, and small rivulets begin carving dark lines through the snow. Children splash through puddles, laughing. No one tells them to stop. Laughter feels precious again, like something worth spending freely. That evening, the entire castle gathers for what the cook insists on calling the first feast of thaw. It's hardly a feast, just stew made from the last of the grain. A few scraps of meat. And the new herbs. But no one cares. The smell alone feels like wealth. The cook stands by the fire, ladle in hand, her face glowing. "Eat," she says. "And remember, hunger doesn't last forever. It just makes the first bite of spring taste better." As bowls are passed around, you look at the people around you, the guards laughing, the servants whispering stories, even the Lord leaning back with something like relief softening his features. Everyone is still thin, still tired, but their eyes are bright again. After supper, someone brings out a small drum, another a flute, and before long, the hall fills with the sound of music. Not solemn hymns or dirges this time, real music. Clumsy but joyful, the kind that belongs to warm nights and open doors. The cook claps along, laughing until tears well in her eyes. "We've earned this noise," she says. You raise your mug toward her. "To the last day of hunger," you say. She laughs. "Don't jinx it." The music swells. People dance, stomping their boots on the stone floor. And for the first time in months, the castle feels like it's breathing again. The walls echo with life instead of silence. Later, as the fire dies low and the laughter fades into tired murmurs, you step outside. The air is damp and soft, carrying the smell of wet earth. Somewhere beyond the walls, a stream trickles faintly. You close your eyes and listen. The world is waking up. And though you know there are still cold nights ahead, still hunger and hardship waiting in the shadows, you also know this: the worst has passed. You whisper to the darkness, "We made it." And for the first time all winter, the night whispers back, not with wind, not with howling, but with the slow, steady drip of melting snow. The sound of survival becoming life again. The morning comes gently this time. No biting wind, no icy silence. Just the soft hush of fog rolling through the thawing fields. The castle feels different, lighter somehow, as if the walls themselves have taken a deep breath after holding it for months. The fires burn smaller now. Not out of scarcity but because they no longer need to rage against the cold. When you open the shutters, the air that slips in smells faintly of mud and grass. Real earth. You hadn't realized how much you missed that scent until now. It's messy, alive, and perfect. Down in the courtyard, puddles glimmer like tiny mirrors. The guards are sweeping the melting snow into channels to guide it toward the well. The cook stands by the gate, hands on her hips, watching a thin ribbon of water trickle down from the hills beyond. "Listen to that," she says with a grin. "The river's waking up." Her words are true. You can hear it even from here, the faint murmur of running water. It's like the heartbeat of the land returning after a long, cold sleep. The villagers arrive again by midday. This time not to trade out of desperation but to share news. "The roads are clearing," one man says, shaking melted snow from his cloak. "We saw green shoots near the abbey fields." His voice trembles slightly, not from cold, but from disbelief. The cook laughs, a real, full sound that fills the courtyard. "Shoots. Did you hear that? We'll eat something that didn't come out of a barrel." For the rest of the day, The castle hums with energy. Everyone has something to do: scrubbing, repairing, mending, preparing for life to resume. Even the Lord descends from his chambers to walk among the people. He's thinner, paler, but his voice carries the kind of warmth that only comes from relief. "You've done well," he says to the cook. "You've kept us alive." She bows her head modestly. "It wasn't just me, my lord. It was the fire, the grain, the hands that stirred the pot." He nods, smiling faintly. "Then let the pot never go cold again." By evening, the kitchen smells of real food again, thin but fragrant stew, flavored with the first green herbs of spring and a pinch of salt saved for this very moment. The cook moves through the room with quiet satisfaction. "Funny thing about winter," she says as she stirs. "You hate it while it's here, and miss it when it's gone." You raise an eyebrow. "Miss it? After all this?" She shrugs, smiling. "There's a kind of honesty in hunger. It makes you notice the taste of everything, of life itself. Spring makes people forget that." The fire flickers warmly behind her. Shadows dance on the walls like faint ghosts of all the long nights that came before. You can almost hear their echoes in the popping of the wood, whispers of cold, laughter, fear, resilience. When dinner is served, everyone gathers again, not from need but from habit. The hall glows with firelight. And outside, the fog has thinned enough to reveal a faint blush of green on the distant hills. You sip your stew slowly. It tastes simple, almost humble, yet it carries the entire memory of winter in it. The smoke, the salt, the patience, the hunger, the faith, every flavor earned. The Lord raises his cup once more. To the end of the frost, he declares, and to those who refused to die with it. The cheer that follows isn't loud, but it's steady, honest. People drink, laugh, breathe easier. Even the walls seem to exhale. Later that night, when the castle quiets, you walk alone along the ramparts. The stars are out again, scattered bright and sharp across a sky finally clear of storm clouds. Below, the river gleams faintly as it winds through the valley. Free at last. The air is still cold, but it's a gentle cold now, the kind that reminds you you're alive. You breathe deeply and think back over the long months, the frozen well, the silent halls, the laughter around the pottage pot, the villagers with their cart of miracles, the cook who kept the fire alive with sheer stubbornness. You realize that winter was never the villain. It was the test. Inside, you hear the faint crackle of the kitchen fire one last time. Steady and sure, you imagine the cook sitting there, half asleep in her chair, ladle still in hand, guarding the embers out of habit, a quiet sentinel against the dark. You whisper into the wind, "We made it." The night doesn't answer, but it doesn't need to. The proof is everywhere, in the dripping eaves, the soft soil, the first crocus blooming near the wall. As you turn to go, the moon rises over the horizon, pale and calm, casting silver over the melting snow. The castle glows faintly under it, no longer a fortress of suffering, but of survival. You pause at the door, listening one last time to the fading sounds, the murmurs of sleep, the breath of wind, the soft sigh of the river. Then you whisper, quietly, as if to the castle itself, "Rest now, you've earned it." The fire in the kitchen pops softly in reply. And with that, The story of the long winter fades, its edges softening like melting frost, until all that's left is warmth. And silence. And peace. End of script. Sweet dreams.